Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry. And who are you?
There's no such thing as the bad man. Eddie of Edward is Truth.
Iocane Powder.
Yeah. I wanted it to sound like I was British, but forcing an American accent, just like Carrie always does, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it does slip out a few times, and I always love when it happens in any of his performances. But Saw, released October 29th, 2004 theatrically, although I believe it was Sundance premiered in January of that year. But anyway, 19 years old, and we're about to hit, or I guess by the time this podcast airs, we'll be at X number of movies.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I'm happy, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, number one, I am always happy to revisit this movie in particular because I've seen it multiple times, but I see it so infrequently that I always forget about things. Yeah. So it's always kind of like a pleasant surprise, one after another, when I make my way through it. And it just made me think, like, I'd actually be really anxious just to kind of continue to dive into these movies during, this Halloween season and just kind of do it for me, because I do enjoy them. I do, and it'd be nice to, rewatch them and on the pave the way to see Saw 10, Saw X. What about you? I
mean, that's definitely, I have different opinions of things, but I'm right there with you. I definitely feel that I need to kind of, like, I actually haven't seen Spiral, but I need to just, like, reacquaint myself with everything just to get up to that point, because I feel like it's going to be the optimal way to enjoy Saw X, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because I just feel like so many of these new movies are so reliant on the previous IP to understand what's going on. Like, we've discussed this before, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The New Beginning. It's just like, oh, that's how what's her name got her apron, or whatever, and especially, and I don't want to talk too much on the sequels or anything, or even the new movie coming out. I just want to we'll keep this focused more on Saw. But I did read a thing, or there was a video of just like the writers or directors or whoever, filmmakers of Saw X, which I like to call Socks, just saying that they said the audience is really going to love all the Easter eggs. And that gave me pause. That just made me feel like...
It's what everybody does.
There are people who love Easter eggs. There's a lot of people who love Easter eggs. But I mean, I like movies for being movies. And I think that, like, classic Zack, I'm going to find a way to take a swipe at Scream 6. But I tell you, there was more conversations, there were more meetings amongst the filmmakers about Easter eggs in that movie than there was about the actual movie. And it gets to a point when if you're more focused on, like, all these little things that you're going to put in there, you're losing sight of the bigger picture. And I mean, I don't want to prejudge Saw X. I've seen the trailers. I think it looks interesting because it looks more personal than anything that, like, we've had in this franchise before. So I want that. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be what it's going to be. But I'm excited for the new movie. I want to see it. I'm probably more excited about it than anything else that's coming out this Halloween season. Because I just watched Saw in preparation for this, like literally right before we started recording here, and I hadn't seen it in a while. I think actually the last time I saw Saw was like right around the time that Spiral was originally going to come out, because remember it got pushed back like a year because it was going to be released right around the time at the beginning of the pandemic, so all those movies got pushed, and I guess it just kind of fell off my radar. Like when it eventually did come out, I just like I didn't have the interest or I was busy or whatnot, but I had watched all the Saw movies from I guess 1 to 8 at that point. and was fully ready to see Spiral whenever it was supposed to originally come out, and it didn't happen. So that was the last time I had kind of done a Saw watch through. So like, what is that, 3 years now?
Yeah, I basically did the same thing. I realized when I was watching, I was like, it's been at least 2.5 or 3 years since I revisited this franchise, and I did watch all of them around the time of the COVID lockdown when, that was the time to revisit a franchise because you got nothing but time. And it's funny, though, because that you would think that being so recent, it would still be really, really fresh in my head, and yet I forgot all over again. Danny Glover is in this movie. Even though I think once you remember things a particular way, no matter how many times you revisit them, unless you kind of like watch them regularly, like every month or even every other month, which I don't with this franchise. I just kind of like haven't seen it for a while, and then I go back, watch it in a chunk, and then move on. So I retain what I retain, but ultimately what I leave with is the same kind of like framework that I walked in with as far as my memory. Like I remember how I feel about the first movie, the second movie, the third movie, as far as rankings, ironically enough. You know me, I don't usually rank stuff, but this movie, I forgot about how I always think about Leigh Whannell, I was getting really strong Ezra Miller face from this time in a way that I'd never had before. There were so many shots where I was like, God damn, you look like Ezra Miller, or Ezra Miller looks like you. But I forgot that like the bulk of the movie really doesn't take place in that room between Leigh and Carrie Elways. So much of it is in flashback or meanwhile, in Gordon's apartment or, stuff like that. It was, I don't know, it was wonderful.
I mean, I'm right there with you because like I always forget what happened. There's so much happening in like not just this movie, but like especially the whole franchise that unless you're like a Saw purist, like unless you're like CZ's World or someone who like loves those movies and knows everything about them, like I don't know anything. Like I'll remember as I'm watching it, but even then it's just like, oh, I don't remember that. Like this is the thing. I know that there's a twist. I just don't know what it is. Like it's the classic like Big Brother, expect the unexpected. That's just what the Saw franchise has become for me. And there's definitely things like in this movie that I remember, like I always remember, because that might be my favorite shot of the movie. It's just like the final twist of just John Kramer standing up, because it's such a great moment. But I completely forgot that, is it Zepp? Is that his name? Zepp?
Yes.
Zepp or Zepp? Yeah.
Zepp.
He comes back into the room there, and then I'm just like, oh, how did that happen? I don't remember him being there, and I don't remember Leigh Whannell smashing the toilet tank top over his head. Like these are all these things I'm just like, okay, I have a memory of that. I don't remember it being those characters in this movie. Like it could have been somewhere else. So it's just like a lot of this franchise just like bleeds together for me, and it's kind of, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing, and I think that what might behoove, I wasn't going to originally say that, but it just kind of slipped out there. What might have behooved? Listen to you. Sound like Hannibal Lecter over here. What might have behooved this franchise? Because I think that like it is a very cerebral, I mean, movie and franchise. That I think it's almost like too smart for its own good in a way, and it's kind of like weighted down by the subject matter and the gore and all that kind of gives it this bad reputation. Because I think that if they leaned more into kind of like the cerebral side of things, it could have worked really well. And not to say that it doesn't work well as it is, I mean, to varying results throughout the years, obviously.
Sure.
But if it was like a television series, I think that they could have streamlined the stories a lot better to kind of interweave with one another and just like kind of be presented in a much neater package, we'll say, rather than like having things like play out over decades and being like, oh, remember that, and like here's that, and it's like because you forget things, like especially if you're watching the, like, because they came out sequentially year after year after year. So, you know, it's different when you're watching like TV is like, or how TV used to be, where it was like a new episode every week. I think that might have played differently. You know, like if that was Saw, it might have been it might have had a different reputation than it does right now.
I never thought of it like that, but I think you're right. Because also with television, the inclination would have been to follow the detectives far more than Jigsaw. Like the dumps that we get, especially as this franchise progresses with Jigsaw's backstory, and then the backstory behind the backstory. And, oh, you thought this was the story, but this is what was really going, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure eventually they would get to it, because all television that has a long-lasting life usually ends up being a soap opera anyway.
Yeah.
But I know they couldn't have leaned as much into the gore and the exploitative nature that I remember at a certain point. It's what made me walk away from the franchise about 4 movies in. But
depending on what network, like if it was like network television, that wouldn't fly. But if you were having it on like a Showtime or HBO,
no limits.
Yeah,
right,
basically.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Like this whole franchise is just one big, enormous soap opera.
Mm-hmm. And but one thing that with some franchises, people kind of it's like the original happens, and then kind of like the franchise grows up behind it, and it becomes its own entity. And then there are others where it's like the original is kind of like the great thing, and then you just get a bunch of sequels that maybe people have seen, but you know, it's rare that people really care about them. Yeah. And I felt like with this one, it maybe it walks a line of both because I feel like when people say the word Saw, I think they most of the time think about the franchise and not this movie. And this movie is so incredibly its own thing. I was really happy to see the care with which the storytelling was layered like throughout, because you're right, there are so many kind of different storylines we're following until we get to the reveal, and then we find out there were even more. We didn't realize that person had a motivation and that person had a motivation. I don't know. It's I kind of wish the weaker entries, shall we say, are the ones that don't do to me what this particular movie does, which is engage me, make me clench, make me brace myself, because I know what's coming, but again, not in a way where it's just kind of like, look at it. It's about building towards something. It's about executing it, the act or the action itself in a way that the audience feels viscerally and then pays off afterward. Just continual returns, I feel, with this movie, and I don't think that's the case with all the sequels.
Well, that's interesting, because like I don't watch this movie a whole lot. I like it. I think it's a 4 out of 5. But as I was watching it today, this might have been my least favorite viewing. And I don't know. What I kind of came to the realization is like this is something you have to really be in the mood for. And I'm just maybe not in the mood for Saw right now, which is funny because it's just like it's Saw season. October, Halloween, and I will say that the movie got better for me as like it got to the end, and I still I really appreciate sort of like the grassroots beginnings of it. Like it's just like it's a very humble indie film at heart. Like it cost $1.2 million to produce this thing, and obviously went on to gross so much more, and you can really tell with this, because it's a very small scope of just what they do. Like it's a single setting location for the bathroom, and all of the other locations that they're on. Like, do you feel like there's a lot of practical places that they shoot, and it works because James Wan like infuses his like signature style, like just making it look like really gritty and nasty. That it just like everything kind of blends together anyway. But there's a distinct quality about just like this first movie that is absent from all of the other movies. But I still feel that just because like this, it's so inherently like it's its own thing. There's no question about it. But it's so inherently part of a larger franchise that I can't watch this and not see like, okay, this is Saw Chapter 1. Right, as opposed to just Saw the movie. And I wish that, I almost do wish that there was no other Saw movies. This was it, because I feel that this would be so much more impactful on its own without having all of that. Because like that's not like John Carpenter's Halloween, where you have all the Halloween movies and you can kind of do your choose your own adventure. But at the end of the day, the original is always going to be that one movie that doesn't rely on anything else. Like you can watch that on its own and it's perfection. And I don't think that that's the same case here. So I mean, like I'd have to go through the movies, which I'm going to do here, and decide like, is the original the best? Because I know that I do like Saw 6 quite a bit, but who knows? I might revisit it and be like, this sucks.
I think I like more of them than I dislike, but it is kind of a give and take. It's almost like a zigzag. Like I'll kind of like it for a while, and then I'll and then I'll stay there, and then I'll go back to, oh, this is very powerful, and then back to I'll take it, that kind of thing.
You have to take.
It's a winding road.
Yeah, you can't just take one movie in the franchise. Like you have to take them all.
Can I ask you a question though?
Absolutely, always.
Prior to screening Saw, what was the last horror movie you watched before? Do you remember? Like for this screening
today, the most recent. I watched Opera.
Okay, and you
Dario
like Opera?
Argento. I have issues with that. Like we could do that for another podcast, but
okay, I love opera, but for reasons. But but like on an Opera to Saw scale, like you have an option between seeing the two of them, like a year from now. Which one are you choosing?
See, now you're really making me think about shit, and because so I'm like a Letterboxd whore, and I had to go in and like rate and review stuff right after I see it most of the time.
Right.
And I gave Opera 3.5 because I mean, like, I think that that movie, it's just funny that we're talking about it because it's so far removed from Saw. But,
right.
Like, it's the stupid, like the logic and like the writing, like the storytelling, like Dario Argento, like he's a director. Like he writes and he everything he directs, he writes. Not everything he writes, he directs, but it's like, at least I know that it's his vision, like his story that he's then like putting into this vision. And I don't know, it was just like, there were certain things about it that I'm like, this movie is nonsense. Like, it's absolutely fucking ridiculous, but it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Like cinematography, everything about it is just like, it's iconic. And I don't know, because I mean, like, I do get a kick out of it. So I don't know if that means that Opera is a 4-star movie for me, or maybe Saw is a 3.5. Because I did give this 4. So I don't know. You're making me question my entire existence with these questions. I like it, but it's like, who am I?
Well, because the only reason I ask is because prior to this, the most recent horror film I watched was The Exorcist, which I had a really good time with. But it's like that one I can, like, from beginning to end, I feel like there's very little surprises. I mean, every now and then I'll catch something in it, but it's not like a whole brand new experience. I remember the way it begins. People rarely do. They're like, "Wow, we're spending a lot of time in Iraq," and I'm like, "Yeah," but which is what my sister said. But prior to that, I was watching Rob Zombie's Halloween, which I've also seen multiple times, and I even posted it on my Instagram story. Why am I watching this? And and it just made me think, like, Saw, I have kind of like the least exposure out of these 3 that I've just mentioned. So I wasn't in the mood for it either when I went into it. I was actually kind of dreading it, thinking like, this is kind of rough, like I'm it's my day off. I kind of feel like cozy and like I'd like to, it's autumnal. I want to have my pumpkin spice, whatever. And I want to,
like
just
the basic bee that you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the basic bee that I am, just put my feet up and watch my basic bee horror. But No, and then it started, and I forgot I was watching like I said, I'm a basic B in the sense that I think of the franchise, and then I put on the movie, and I was like, oh, I actually like this movie. Yeah, there's a reason, and there's another reason, and there's another reason, and so that's what the experience was like for me. It was like one glorious little surprise for me after another.
I think I have the answer for you now that we've kind of talked it out, because, well, you mentioned Exorcist. First of all, I would say that I would much prefer to watch The Exorcist. Like, oddly enough, I would watch The Exorcist before I watch Saw. Because I think that The Exorcist is a better movie. I might have given it like a similar rating, but I still prefer it. But I think that like in terms of like opera and Saw, I would probably sooner watch opera, because like I said, with Saw, there's almost like this obligation to watch the following 9 movies.
I see.
And that in itself is like a daunting task. And at that point, it doesn't really become like the movie itself. It becomes like the average score of all the movies together, and I feel at that point it would then drop down lower, because this is not a movie, like, even now I'm just like, I have to watch Saw 2, I have to watch the next one, and I don't necessarily want to, but I've opened Pandora's box, and I gotta do it. So that's why I say, like, I wish this movie, I mean, I'm not mad about the sequels, and I know that a lot of people really love this franchise, and it means a lot to them that there are new movies coming out and all that, but I just feel like it's not a movie that I can just be like, I'm gonna watch Saw, and then like tomorrow I'm gonna watch Rosemary's Baby, and then The Thing. It's you really have, like I said, you have to be in a mood for it, and you have to like set yourself up to be ready to experience the entire thing. So hopefully that gave you and everyone listening some clarity. It certainly did for me. I feel like these are therapy sessions with you and I sometimes. We work through our problems.
Feel about Saul?
Yeah.
Does that matter to you, Zack? Why? Yeah. Anyway, that's my therapist.
Okay, no, great. Well, okay. Before we get to the premise, I just would like to welcome some new Patreon supporters. So welcome to Richard, Nicole Hutchison, TSP, which I don't know if that's teaspoon, but we'll say TSP, Robbie with a Y, Peyton Rott, Nina Luff, and Nova Lee. So thank you very much to all of the new Patreon supporters. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter yourself, you can head over to patreon.com and look for Zack Cherry. So that is Patreon supporting for the Cherry Picker, as well as my main YouTube channel. And with that, you will get early access to all of the new Cherry Picker episodes. And if you are subscribed to the Freddy Krueger tier, you will get access to our Cherry Picker After Dark, which is the Patreon exclusive episode that we do every month. We just did Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 6, and we've got something in store for October. We're doing a lot of fun things in October.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. But anyway, very much appreciate any support you can offer. And I would also like to thank Boy Cried Wolf, who is our editor. So thank you very much to him and all the hard work that he does for the podcast.
Yes.
And having said that, do you have a voice that you're going to...
I mean, I just thought about doing like the Jigsaw voice. The problem is it may waver between Tobin Bell and maybe Christian Bale as Batman.
Tobin Bale.
Like in the middle of it, I'll just start shrieking, "Where is she?" But I don't know. We'll
No, you just made me think of Ready or Not, like when what's her face says like Mr. LaBelle. Tobin Bale. Christian Bale.
I could read it like a Southern Belle.
You read it however you want. This is the part of the podcast where everyone gets up and goes to the bathroom anyway.
How dare you, sir? All right.
Me?
You didn't have to.
I'm not the one shaking the dew from my liver.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. This just got weird. I'm just gonna read.
Jesus Christ. All right, let's go.
I didn't rehearse this. Okay. Um, two. Is that right? Does that sound Tobin Bell enough? It's kind of my regular horror voice. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two apparent strangers, Dr. Lawrence Gordon and Adam Stanite, awaken in a room with no initial recollection of how they got there, only to discover they are both pawns in a deadly game perpetrated by the notorious criminal named Jigsaw. Huh?
Wrong movie,
Good,
but
right?
yeah, sure, okay.
What'd I do?
I don't know what you did. First experiences. Do you want to go first or should I?
You just asked me, so I'll go first.
All right.
Yeah, I did not see this in the theater. I rented it with my then boyfriend, and we watched it too early in the day. Like, it was not cute. It was like we had breakfast and then we watched Saw. And I wasn't ready, and I remember it shook me, it rocked me. This is probably another reason why a lot of people think of Saw like this way, because I remember the things that I carried away from me were kind of like the things that Saw as a franchise seemed to lean into the most, which is the violence and the shall we say the cop gone wrong of it all, and the the secrecy and the all that. Okay. So that was, I remember I liked it. I remember I was curious about, I don't remember if 2 wasn't out yet, but I knew it was coming and I was anxious to see it after seeing this movie. So that's what I remember. Subsequently, I do remember revisiting it and realizing this is kind of like a grim fairy tale for adults, which I'll unpack more after I toss the ball to you. Your first experience, how did you see this? What were the circumstances, Zach?
I did not see this in the theater. When it came out. And I'm trying to think, I would have, 2004, I would have been old enough to see it, because this was, at least in my region of Canada, like rated restricted, which is different than like the American one. Like that, like American restricted is basically like the equivalent. Well, I think it's like you have to be 17. Or anyone under 17, you have to be accompanied by an adult. And here, we have something similar to that. It's a year above that. It's 18A, or at least that was the rating at the time. This was just a hard R. So you could not see it if you were under 18. And I didn't obviously I could have went to see it because I was of age. And that was the thing that was like, whenever a movie came out that was like restricted like that, because that's basically NC-17 or NC-18, I was just like, oh, I have to see this. It's basically like anything that like kids aren't allowed to see, like I'm gonna be all over that. And I don't know, I just like it never happened. I didn't get a chance to see it at the time. I don't know, like for whatever reasons, but I was always like just so like enthralled by that, because like anytime I would see something of that classification, it'd just be like, yes, give me more of that. I want these X-rated horror movies. And it's funny, like watching it now, it's just like, I mean, I could see maybe the like some of the subject matter might have been suggestive, but I mean, like in comparison to like things that we have now, it's like it's so tame. I would even say argue that it was tame back then in 2004. So I didn't really, I didn't see it. I didn't have any experience with it. And then the sequel came out the next year, and I didn't see that in the theater either. Actually, I just, to be fully transparent here, I have never seen a Saw movie in the theater ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've caught them all, after the fact. I don't know if that's telling. Like, do I like this franchise? I have every intention of seeing the new one in the theater, but, so I didn't see 2 when it came out, and I remember like coworkers talking about it, because someone was like, oh yeah, we're going to see Saw 2, and I was like, oh yeah, I've heard like stuff about Saw, and they're just like, yeah, like they even said like the first one was like super tame. I think the tagline for 2 was like there will be blood or something like that. Does that sound right? Yeah, because I would see like the
I remember fingers.
Yeah, I would see the ad for it in like the newspaper, and it was like, promised more gore. And yeah, one of my coworkers was just like, yeah, like the first one's like, like it had this reputation for being really gory, but there was really nothing about it. So like this new one is going to be like the all the gore that was promised before that was never there.
Okay.
Right.
See, people, it's interesting, like young people, even when I was one of them, I remember the rumblings that they would make around like ratings and things like that. Like, what? A horror movie that's only a PG-13? I'd be like, well, it could still be a good movie. Like, I mean, you could, so you're not going to get to see her sawed completely in half. But what if you get to, what if the build up to it is, effectively kind of like, executed, and what if it, it actually hits in like a way that like, shakes you. Like it could still be good, guys. And just because it's art doesn't mean it's going to be good. But, and even just like, again, like, like it's going to be even more violent or even more gory and stuff like that. It's like, great. I mean, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to turn my nose up to it and go like, oh, I am a connoisseur of cinema. I do not lean into such things. I do. But in fact, that's what got me into contemporary horror. I loved the Nightmare on Elm Street movies when they were contemporary movies because they were gross. I loved The Thing because it was gross, But, I don't know. I maybe I just have a more varied palate. It's just an appetite that kind of spans multi subgenres and different things that horror can lean into as far as strengths. But it's just interesting to hear that because it sounds like a lot of things that a lot of people have been saying around me for a long time. That I always kind of go, all right, if that's the way you look at it.
I mean, I didn't take it from the people who said that like that wasn't what I felt. It's just like the first movie was too tame. It was just more of just like, oh, this one's going to be much bloodier, But I understand your argument, and I agree. So, that movie came out, and I didn't see it. And then I think it was like finally when it was released on, I guess, DVD. At the time, we still had Blockbuster Video, or maybe it was Rogers, I don't remember. But anyway, I went to the video store because I was just like, I'm going to rent Saw tonight. I'm going to finally like, pop my Saw cherry. And they didn't have it. They were like literally like, you could go to the video store and there would not be a copy of it. Like this was right after Saw 2 came out. There was enough copies of that, but the original was gone. So I was talking to the person at the store and they're like, yeah, we have Saw 2. And I'm like, okay, well, here's a question. Should I see Saw 1 before I see Saw 2? Because I was just very impatient. People are raving about this. I just want to watch the fucking movie. And he's like, I mean, not really. You can watch Saw 2 without having to see the first one. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I watched Saw 2, and I mean, I was like, it is what it was. I don't even remember that experience, but the whole movie seemed like there's a lot here that I probably should have seen in Saw 1. So the guy lied to me. And I think it was eventually... I don't remember when it was because I remember I might have seen the movie before this, but there was like a DVD, like a very thin like plastic DVD that had blood in it, like fake blood and like a little saw thing.
Right.
And that's the one I bought, and I owned it because I really loved the original. The sequels I didn't like care that much for, but I eventually got around to seeing them, and I bought all the sequels as well. But yeah, my fondest memories were with the original. And if I did watch them, I would just try to watch the first one, like I said. But now it's like we're into that franchise oversaturation. But yeah, I think I was blown away the first time I saw like the original. Even though I saw the second one first, and I still get the same kind of value out of it that I did today, just like just seeing those like its humble beginnings and just like a really great script and just filmed to the best of its ability with a limited budget. Like it's such a great movie. But that's all I have to say about that.
Cool. No, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think I'm kind of an unofficial, like I'm not carrying a card or anything, but and I'm barely conscious of it myself, but I find that I'm probably a James Wan fan. I mean, Insidious is in my top 10 horror. Insidious 2 is another story. But I mean, even some of the movies of his that I'm not a huge champion of. I can find some kind of like value. Usually it's visually based. Like I love the man's eye. From everything from like Aquaman to what's the name of the one with the fucking twin?
Furious 7?
The thing within her head.
Oh, Malignant.
Yeah. I don't really care.
I thought you were talking about
the
Fast and the Furious.
No.
Where they got Paul Walker's twin
we're family,
to play him.
right?
Yeah.
James Wan did one of those, right?
Yeah.
No, I still have to catch up on the Fast and the Furious franchise. I never got past the third movie. But anyway. No, from like Malignant and Aquaman, like have their strengths and everything like that. Yeah. Certainly visual. But one thing that I really liked about seeing even the opening of this movie, I always love it when films begin with something that creates visual interest, but also kind of like doesn't allude to anything specific where there's a question mark, an air of mystery around it. So you just kind of see what looks like a light floating around in water, and you don't quite know what you've seen. And even when we move through that particular section, of the opening, where it goes down the drain and, and the water's going down and he gets out, you still don't quite know what that is. And it doesn't get answered for over an hour, like later. Yes? I
have a question about that. Because is it like, that's something that comes up in another movie, right? Because this is sort of like the conceit of Jigsaw as a killer or character. Like, just like these little things, because like that was like his escape out of there, but he was basically set up for a fail. Because it's just like him coming out of the tub just like drained the key down there. So it's like almost like, what's the point? Just so he can be like, oh, I put it there, but you should have known better. And it's just like, what the fuck, man? But like all throughout the movie, people are like, well, actually, he's not really a killer because he doesn't actually kill people. It's just like, what? Go to a fucking court of law. Go on Judge Judy. Is she going to be like, oh yeah, legally he didn't kill you because he didn't do the thing. You did it to yourself. Like, he put these people in these fucking situations where where they were either going to die if they didn't do, like, that is murder. And also the fact that he slices Danny Glover's throat with that thing. I mean, even if he didn't die there, that was definitely intention to murder. So it's just like it's just like this inconsistency in the logic, which I know has been brought up a lot by people like throughout the franchise. It's just like, Jigsaw's not actually a killer. It's just like, please. Like, I wish that whole line had just never been in there, because it's created more problems than anything.
It's a very turn of the century kind of way of looking at things, like just to kind of like make them seem bleaker than they are. But I mean, I remember as I moved through the franchise last time, I got angrier. I mean, it started with this movie, but I got angrier and angrier with Johnny Jigsaw, which is what I refer to him after a while, because he really gets on my nerves and he doesn't deserve an imposing name, or because number one, who are you to judge other people to determine what they need to go through in order to kind of come out the other end or deserve death, even though we do it on the cherry picker all the time, but not really. But not really. We don't go around kidnapping people and stuffing them in closets and then putting like bear traps on their face
on purpose.
I know. I know there are some we would like to, but we don't do it because we're good people. But the other thing that's upsetting to me is the kind of the fact that, but isn't that what cult leaders do? Is like get enough people to kind of like see things their way so that they can kind of get away with it in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. So it seems effective in that vein. Unfortunately, it has an effect on the viewers of these movies as well as the characters within them. But
well, that's interesting, because now you're
talk about that.
Now you're making me look at Jigsaw as like a Charles Manson. With his like Amandas and all them. But here's the question: like, when they made, and you probably know more about this than I do, like when they conceived of the original Saw, was there the idea to go off down this spiral, if you will, of movies that just kind of that would have taken this continuity? Because like you could look at the original as its own standalone thing, like without the others, and until it gets to the point where it's just like they're so interconnected now that I question, like, was Amanda always like, because there is her scene when she's being interviewed about the escaping the trap, and she says he helped me. So it is kind of planting the seeds there. So I don't know if if they had planned to, or if this is just kind of serendipitous on the part of the continuing series.
Right. One thing I can say, when you start at square one with any horror movie, I'm sure you always start off with, let's make the best movie possible and focus on that. And that's usually why the original is as strong as it is, as often as it is. But you always hope. I mean, you've built a universe where conceivably you can just keep interchanging victims. You can unpack more of his backstory, of Jigsaw's backstory, or any of the other people who he has working as his henchmen or his operatives or whatever you want to call them. That's, I'm sure, the dream. And also probably, like, in the back of the mind, like, the plot. Like, at least there's an open door. It's not a finite end, like, not even for Adam. Which we see later. But as far as my own insight to the production and everything like that, this is one of those franchises I think I have the least insight to, because I think I've never owned them on any kind of physical media, which is, like, already just kind of like granting access to behind the scenes and everything like that. Yeah. Even now, I watched this first movie. I streamed it off Amazon Prime because I happen to be, subscribed to Amazon Prime at the moment, and gratefully so. And much of the sequels are on there too. But I don't know.
I am shocked by that, because for some reason, I don't know if we've had conversations before, but I always thought, like, Saw was one of your, like, higher ups in terms of franchises.
This is the thing. It's one of my higher ups whenever I revisit it, but the problem is, like, right now the appetite is whetted, and I can't wait to even watch the chapters I know I don't care for that much, and remind myself, oh yeah, that's why I don't care for this particular movie. And and then, this is why it upswings. This is why I remember that, and then also be reminded of some things I've forgotten. But it's always fun to revisit at, like, a dead run from beginning to end of the franchise, whatever that may be, at whatever stage I am when I do it. Yeah. When I reach the end of it, I know it's going to be a very long time before I revisit the movies again. Yeah. And I don't know that I've ever rented a sequel out of sequence unless it's the newest release. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't go, you know what? I'm in the mood for Saw 5. I'm going to put that on. I don't do that. Yeah. And but I just, because even with there's elements of this one that I guess could be strikes against it, but they just work for me. One thing in terms of performance, I feel I love what Carrie Elwes does in this movie, but I think the reason I love it is kind of like related to the same reason I love what Rebecca Gayheart does in Urban Legend. She's having so much fun, and on rewatches, for different reasons, you can kind of like go through their experience and experience the performance with them. There's clearly a thought process that has gone into it, and there's clearly an investment, but there's also, from beginning to end, I feel like Carrie Elwes is playing to the back row in his own way. Like from the moment he gets up, he's just kind of like, hey, you ready to American accent, and then when the lights are on, he's like, hey, I'm just trying to talk to somebody. Look off in the distance, try and figure out what's going on. Like, he is so there's never kind of any ambiguity to what he's doing. It's always like very, very clear and very, very put into the face of the camera, and I love it. It also adds to maybe a soap opera level. And I don't mean disingenuous. I just mean heightened, a little bit more theatrical. That makes me really, really happy. Do you notice that at all?
No, I agree. He's great in it. I was even like finding myself enjoying Leigh Whannell's performance, because I mean, like, it's obviously been heavily criticized because it's Leigh Whannell. He's not an actor, and he does not a great job. But it's almost like in and of itself, it's just like that is so ingrained into the DNA of this movie that you can't not watch Saw and just be like, just watch this guy. Just like his line deliveries. I think my favorite part is when which he actually does really well, is when he's acting, when
Oh,
they're
right.
faking the death.
Or whatever.
Yeah, it's just like that's believable. That I feel is genuine. It's kind of like when you were talking about like Skeet Ulrich playing Billy Loomis, but playing Billy Loomis playing not the killer, talking to Sydney. So
Typical American boyfriend. Yeah.
So it's just funny with Leigh Whannell in that instance, and then of course we get the wonderful electroshock thing, which was great. Yeah. I always forget about that too. That always that's almost like a jump scare for me. Like not really, but every time it happens, I'm like, oh, I forgot about that, and then like it happens to Gordon later on. Which is really great. I do have a question for you, and it's not Saw related, but just because you did mention just your, I guess, frequency at revisiting franchises. Do you have a franchise that you revisit more often than others?
Oh, dear God. I mean, it's that Instagram meme of like, you know, the guy walking with his girlfriend, and then there's the girl who's turning his head, and the girl he's walking with, or like, you know, new releases and the girl turning his head, or movies I've seen 100 times before. Kind of like the franchises I've already declared my undying love for, like my Child's Play, my Psycho, my Nightmare on Elm Street, that kind of stuff. I find, and even the ones that aren't like my favorite tip of the top, like you know, Friday the 13th and Halloween, I still adore, and I watch them more regularly. And I mean the whole, again, sometimes it's just one movie. I'm in the mood for Halloween 4. I'm in the mood for Friday 7. Yeah. You know, and I can watch them out of sequence. But I also love watching them in sequence, and I also love watching them in the sequence of my ranking that I gave them the first time I ever ranked anything.
Or out of sequence, so they get better and better as you go along.
Exactly.
You do that too, yeah.
Start with the worst one, and then that way there's always something to look forward to after this one.
I think it's and funny that you mentioned Child's Play, because I've always said that. I mean, at this point now, that's the most consistent franchise for me, and I think that with like the television show as well, it feels like I'm getting so much Child's Play. Like we're going through the Child's Plays now on the podcast. There's a reason for it. So I think, I mean, Scream obviously and Child's Play definitely would be for me. That's really cool. No, I like that.
Yeah. Another performance that stood out to me, I mean, that I thought of because you can only have seen the movie or have it spoiled for you prior to watching this to know that Tobin Bell Jigsaw is on the floor with the prosthetic brain, whatever matter that he has, that he pulls off and just after he wakes up and everything. But the thing is,
coming to life again. He's just born again.
I just love kind of speculating every now and then on rewatches, just kind of going back to him and wondering, God, what is he doing? Like, is Johnny Jigsaw laying there in a meditative state that prevents him from falling asleep? Because if you fall asleep, you run the risk of snoring or of breathing heavily, so they can see that you're still alive.
I think it was kind of, it might have been established in one of the sequels that how he did it is he took some sort of drug that slowed his heart rate down to a point where it like made him appear dead, but he was like fully conscious, and that's how he was able to do it and still like, you know, be able to zap them and all that. I just love the like when he gets up, because it's just like he's just like old man like
yes,
that's been so bad on my back, and I just love the way he just like
relate.
He just turns around and is just like, nah, the key's over there, and of course like the iconic like game over.
Yes. Oh, that's what a great final moment. But also just Tobin Bell is one of those few actors I'm convinced I could be in a room with, convinced that he's dead if he wanted me to be. He's just that chill. You know, like he's not a terribly, at least throughout these movies, the way he plays Johnny Jigsaw. And in this movie is no exception. But even though he's largely kind of alluded to, I forgot what kind of like a character of the shadows he is. Very Batman.
What is
just very, you know, I'm Jigsaw.
I mean, at this point, I feel like Tobin Bell has become the star of the franchise. Like, it's just like, everyone gets so excited when this like 80-year-old man comes back, and they're like, yeah, like he's so sexy. We need that, like that sex appeal of Tobin Bell. And then like, you know, a coming in and like I think it was like Saw 7 or whatever, just like putting the backwards cap on to make him like de-age because they didn't fuck with the CGI. But there's a question, like, what is he besides this? What is he known for? Like, was he famous before? Was he an actor when he was younger? Because I don't recall seeing him in the first thing that I remember seeing him in actually was 24. Do you remember the Kiefer Sutherland show?
Right.
He was, I think he was in the second season. He was like the main villain, and he was like very underused. Like I remember by the end of it, like that's it. Like I wish that he was in it more because he has like such an intimidating presence without really having to do a whole lot. And it's definitely a lot of it is in the voice, but he just kind of like has this gaze that's just like he just looks at people like who the fuck are, like where do you get off? And also I'm gonna kill you.
Because there's this inherent stillness that he can just kind of like hone in on that is incredibly effective because even though it's still, even though it seems like it might be passive, there's always something running beneath it. I would never call him like a dead behind the eyes actor. But I do believe that he manages to kind of house the activity inside. It's always a great jolt whenever Johnny Jigsaw does become violent or anything. But I'm looking at his credits right now, and his first credit on IMDb is in Woody Allen's Manhattan in 1979 when he played an uncredited role as Man on Street. He was also in Tootsie as a waiter, also uncredited. He was in The Verdict with Paul Newman, also uncredited. He was in Sophie's Choice as a reporter, also uncredited. So then he was in Mississippi Burning and Alien Nation and Goodfellas. I mean, he racked up as a character actor a lot of work. He was on an episode of Seinfeld playing Ron. Do you remember that?
What's the name of the episode? Maybe that.
It's season 4. It's The Old Man. Elaine gets the gang to volunteer visiting the elderly, each adopting an old person. Do you remember? I must have seen him in. I recognized him.
I distinctly remember him. Now that you mentioned, remember seeing him on Seinfeld, but I don't know. Maybe he was like the director at the nursing home.
Maybe. But I mean, and he did a shitload of TV, like
Sopranos,
La Femme Nikita, Stargate. So he had a career, X-Files, but he, I didn't know the name Tobin Bell. I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup prior to this franchise. This is what I think finally made him land.
It definitely shot him to
stardom.
Fandom, at least, because what has he really done besides the Saw movies that's really like put him on the map? I feel like he's known for Saw
10 now.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, just outside of the Saw franchise, like, how many people would see him and just be like, oh, Tobin Bell, I'm familiar with his work. It's mostly like it's the Saw fans are just like Jigsaw, John Kramer, Johnny Jigsaw, whatever you call them.
When you say it like that, it's like, hey, kids, I'm Johnny Jigsaw.
Hey,
just like Johnny Carpenter.
If he shows up at conventions, that's just like his little shtick.
Right. Hey, is that a saw I see? Don't let it near me. Oh, I'm gonna cut you.
I mean, he's got a lot of vitality for, like, I mean, not to say like that you can't be 80 and not have any, but he's like, he's still doing these. He's like doing interviews for them, and it's just like he's literally in a movie, like playing 20 years younger. Like it's like he's got it going on. Like I'm telling you, he
does his own flashbacks.
He can get some. But
oh dear. But also, one thing that I alluded to earlier was just kind of like the grim fairy tale nature of these movies for me. And one thing that I always hone in on, it's the thing that actually I find the scariest. And it took rewatches for me to kind of like deaden the impact of the violence. And because I mean, I wouldn't even call it gore in this movie, but bloodshed, I suppose.
Sure.
And angst, angst driven acts of violence, that we could call it that. But I think the thing that got me the most on rewatches, and it got me today, was I remember being in my mid-20s rewatching this movie and being terrified of the notion of you committing some kind of heinous sin that isn't apparently a sin to you. You know you're pissing your life away, or you know you're, screwing other people over and using them. You know you're just wasting away and you don't even have to be doing anything. You could literally just be pissing your life away, just like, is stagnant and depressed, which I can identify with. And not at the time I couldn't, but in retrospect I was like, oh, I've been there. Oh God, well, I'm glad Johnny Jigsaw didn't catch me on a bad day, because if he would have observed me, that someone could have been in my closet. Someone could have, injected something into my neck, and I could have woken up in a fucking trap saying, fight for your stupid fucking life. He doesn't say that, but you know what I mean. And something about that, being in a dire situation that is, that kind of commands without even thinking, you kind of have to go on instinct. Is my life worth saving? And for a long time with this franchise, I always kind of wished, and I can't remember if I don't think it's happened yet, but no spoilers. We won't spoil it for anybody. But certainly with this movie, I wondered, an interesting matter would go, what if they chose someone who was kind of stagnant and not, and this is kind of a blessing for them, and they just kind of let it take them? What if they just didn't even fight for their life, just kind of sat there and let it tick away?
He could have got.
It would be one of the most anticlimactic sequences in the entire franchise, but I think it'd be interesting from a psychological standpoint.
He could have got Buffy circa season 6.
Just in terms of exploring the possibilities and statistically, I feel like at some point they have to come across someone who's just kind of giving up, not even trying.
But then what do they do? They're just kind of there's no movie, there's no excitement. They just sit there and wait to die.
There would have to be another character who's kind of depending on them to save their lives in order to get.
We kind of do get that in some movies, and because there's another inconsistency or really the contradiction with Jigsaw's I guess method of just of let it it's only bad people who or people who are squandering their lives, but then he'll take people who are obviously innocent and put them in these situations, and then it's their lives are dependent on whoever the main character is, who doesn't give a shit anymore. Those ended up being the ones that I hated the most, because it's just this is so fucking it's I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but there was a lot of them like that. So I don't but know.
Right. But it just created a new adult boogeyman for me. Just the fact that there's someone who could be conceivably watching you waste your life and decide, all right, if you don't care about your life, let's watch you not care about your life. There was something inherently terrifying to me at the time about that, and it still works. That there's a pig in a robe man.
I think the thing that I do appreciate about the way that they do it is because it just kind of it shows this sense of just people being no, I do want to live. And it's just once you're put in that position and you kind of have a new perspective on things, how do you respond to that differently? Because it's everyone does. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in the new one if they try anything different. But at this point, I don't care. I wanted to say.
Yes, you were going to say, go for it.
No, because I'm moving along, so if you have another thought that you wanted to say about that.
No, I was going to move along too, so your turn.
Well, I wanted to, there was some moments actually, another great moment that I actually really loved, which was shot really well, is when the little girl, whose name I can't even remember, whatever, we've already established, she's
Diana.
saying that someone is in my room. Diana, that's such an old person's name for a little girl.
I know.
No offense
she's
to
already
anyone.
An adult with a job.
No offense to anyone named Diana.
she's a princess of Wales.
I guess she could have been. It would have, if she was a Diane, it would have been even more mature for the little girl. But
that's
I don't even remember.
I guess every Diana is a girl at some point, though.
That's true. That's true. What was the mom's name? Or the wife?
Good question. Allison.
Right.
Allison.
And and I think he called her Allie. Yeah. Larry and Allie. Larry.
Those two.
The moment, like, after, because when they, tucks her in and turns out the light, and she sits up in bed, and she's just sitting at the edge of her bed, and the camera kind of pans over. There's like this empty space. It's completely pitch black. Like, I think that was such a beautiful shot. Just like the creepiest part in the movie. And then it kind of goes into something that I've always really loved about these movies. I mean, it's not original, but I appreciated that James Wan was paying homage to horror movies of the 70s here, at least two that I could really pick out. And in that particular moment, we were getting Black Christmas with the eyeball through the closet door.
Absolutely.
And then the other instance of 70s horror was, and funny that we were talking about Dario Argento earlier, because Deep Red, with the inclusion of Billy the Puppet and sort of like the laughing, and like if anyone's seen that movie, we'll have to cover that one soon. But the little puppet coming out laughing, and then him smashing it to bits with the baseball bat.
Right.
Also
another possible allusion to Black Christmas, because Billy the Puppet, Billy the Eyeball. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Billy. Anyway, creepy. Oh, I don't want to think about Black Christmas. Okay. That creeps me out even more than this movie. But again, someone in my house. I have things about people in my house without, my consent.
It's the idea of the home invasion that you don't know about.
Oh, fuck no.
Because home invasions are one thing, like when someone's like actively in your house and fucking with you, but if they're already in there and you don't know, and you are completely ignorant to that, like that's the creep factor. That's
also if their way in is not to start kind of like at the top of the food chain, as it were, like like start with like whoever poses the biggest threat in the household, like which would be basically the adult in most people's eyes. The fact that like Diana's like seeing this thing in her closet, and she knows that it's there, and then she has a whole scene with her father, and then the fact that when she's there alone with Allison, and she sees the eyeball and screams, and Allison runs. We follow Allison from one end of the apartment to the other. The thing that gets me is cinematic tropes tell us that when she gets there, there's probably going to be an open window with like drapes billowing, like, or something like that. Or the last thing she's going to see is like her daughter's hands like gripping the side of the window, "Mommy!" Something like that. No. Her daughter is not gone. Her daughter is in her bed screaming at a stranger covered in a fucking sheet. That is worse than either of the two scenarios that I just said, just because the threat is still there and it has yet to commit whatever act it's going to commit. So
we can't see who it is.
Yeah, you're not only afraid, you are also panicking because, well, now what do I do? Because he's still here, or it's still here. Do I attack? Do I... and you don't even have the time to like rationalize. You have to go on your gut instinct, and obviously it wasn't working in Allison's favor at that particular juncture, because they both ended up tied up. So,
I was thinking of a video that I had seen on YouTube. I'm sure it's made its rounds, of just like crazy things caught on camera, and it was someone's like home security, like CCTV in their kitchen, and a person had somehow like gotten into their house at some point, like months earlier, and was living in like the crawl spaces. And in the middle of the night, when the people who owned the house were asleep, they would come out of this opening or just something in the kitchen and like kind of like crawl down onto the counter and then just like eat the food and then go back into the thing. And this went on for months until they finally saw it. Because I think they might have got the cameras because they were noticing that food was disappearing overnight. Mm-hmm. You okay?
I saw my own version of that where there was. I don't know if I saw the same one because it was a guy who lived alone. Yeah. So he knew nobody else could be drinking.
It might. It very well might have been that. It might have been the guy who lived alone.
But, she was a very thin woman who like there was.
I think that's it was a thin.
It looked like a sconce like up above, and she'd push it open like a little door. Like
that was it.
Door,
yeah.
And crawl out onto the counter, and then even move the stool so she could like step down onto that, so she wouldn't just land on the floor and make a thud. Oh, and then she just went into the refrigerator. Oh God, yeah. I checked. I don't usually check because it's like I'd rather not know. But when I see shit like that, it's like, okay, every closet. I have an attic. I don't know that I can open it, but I'm gonna make sure it creaks or making noise so I can hear it because I'm not a sound sleeper. I wake up. So fuck shit. I
might have
scary.
Yeah, I might have mentioned this like before on the podcast, but I like get really paranoid if I don't do this anymore. I don't know like why I ever used to do this, but I like sometimes I would go out and I'd forget to lock my door. Yeah, like when I was younger, like probably like in my early 20s. I don't know how that would happen. Or sometimes I don't think it was maybe it was I'm misremembering. Maybe I would just leave my keys in the door. Have you ever done that where you come home, you unlock the door?
No, I have not done that, I don't think.
I've definitely done that. I've seen neighbors do that. Like I'll walk by someone's door and I'll see the keys in there. And I think like, should I knock and let them know? But I'm just like, no, whatever. But yeah, I just like, there'll be times where I can't find my keys and I'll like the next day and I'll like open the door and like, they've been there all fucking night. And then I'm freaking out and then I have to like do a like an entire search of my house. Like I'll look in like closets. Like I'll be ready. I'll be like, if anyone's there.
Yeah.
And obviously nothing ever comes of it. But I remember one time, and this is when I had a roommate, and we worked together. So he actually went to work first because he had to be there earlier in the night, and then I was there later. But before I left, he had called me because he's like, "Hey, can you see if you can find something?" And then like and bring it to work with me. So yeah, I was sure. So I was like looked in his closet and all that, and I found it. And then I left. And then, we were at work. We came home and noticed that the light was on in his bedroom. And I had forgotten like completely about the fact that I was in there like looking for that thing earlier. So I was freaking out. He's like, why the fuck is my light on? So I'm like, we have to go into the house. Like I think we might have like grabbed knives or something. And we were like looking at everything. I made him do that. Like he was laughing at me. And finally at the end, like nobody was there, nothing was missing, and he might have said like, well, wait, you got that thing for me. I forget who remembered, but it's just like, oh, dummy, you left the fucking light on. But it's just like I will be paranoid. I will have to do everything to make sure that, even when I go out, like I live on the top floor, but I will not leave my balcony open, like it's a sliding door. Right. I will not leave it open because I don't think that it's kind of impossible for anyone to kind of like climb up like that. And especially I don't think my neighbors down below could make that trip. But still, I always think like, what if? I don't want anyone sneaking around in here. So I definitely that aspect, I know we went off on a tangent here, but like that aspect of like home invasions where it's just like the things that you don't see, that's what's scary to me. And I would love to see more horror movies where they kind of incorporate the idea of home invasions, where it's like where people don't know about it, and not just like we haven't seen them for a while, because that is very Black Christmas of just. And don't remake Black Christmas again. Do something new. But like, just something of someone being in your space for a much longer period of time. Because it's like, it's that sensation of like knowing that you're alone, but not feeling like you're alone.
That's what's terrifying, that you don't have a sixth sense that kicks in and goes, wait a minute. Like, that thing that happens to sorority girls in old horror movies where, they'll like walk into a room and go, what? Huh?
My sorority senses are tingling.
Yeah, my sorority spidey sense is tingling. But I think also, like, and then we can abandon like the personal stuff. But for me personally, like, because I
like the personal stuff.
Okay, well, I've been broken into when I was younger, when I was like, I think I was a teenager. Yeah. And prior to that, I was already hyper vigilant. Like, whenever I'd come home from school alone, and I'd be in the house alone because my dad was still at work, my mom was still at work, my sister's God knows where, and I'd be home alone. If I heard a noise or something, my immediate reaction, my reflexive reaction, would be to grab 2 knives, and I don't know if I've ever told you this before, I'd hold one with the handle with the blade facing like up, and I'd hold the other with the handle with the blade facing down. So if somebody was behind me, I got a good, and if somebody was ahead of me, or if somebody was, whatever is going on, I am within stabbing range. I can do some damage to someone at 2 angles, facing up and facing down.
Have you seen the latest Britney Spears video? The little TikTok. Happened? Oh no, she's like dancing with like knives. She's got like 2 knives and she's doing this like.
Oh, I did see that.
She's got her like dead eye stare. She's wearing the underwear and like sort of like the whatever it is like.
Right.
Tied up there with her exposed belly and just like doing this like expressionless dance.
Right. and the people kept like superimposing their own like horror movie themes over it, like John Carpenter or like whatever, Pino Donaggio. But so I would walk around like that and always to like no to no consequence. But thank God I never killed anybody innocent either. But I remember one time coming home and seeing that the house had obviously been broken into. That was scary because I couldn't find my cats. I was like weeping because my bedroom window was wide open, and I of course did not leave it that way. I'd never seen it open in my life, so now it's open, and that was but whatever. And luckily I found my cats. They were inside. They were just hiding. One of them actually got stashed in the tub because she must have been too underfoot, so they just picked her up and threw her in the tub. Oh, no. They were fine though. It was fine, but then on one family vacation, I can't remember if it was prior or after, we rented a motorhome and drove up actually to Canada. And visited Vancouver and Victoria. And I remember at one point we had to cross a body of water and, like park on one of those ships that houses multiple vehicles, like a garage on water. And a lot of people break into vehicles at that times. And apparently motorhomes are really easy to break into. Somebody broke into our motorhome and stole a bunch of our shit on our vacation. It was scary when it happened. Yeah. So because of that, I won't say I never leave the door unlocked now, but I always either remember to lock the door and don't set the alarm, or I set the alarm and forget to lock the door overnight. And the next morning, then my mother does the same thing. But the next morning we'll usually be like, well, at least one of the things would have kicked in our defense. We haven't forgotten. Full on forgotten to like arm the house and full on forgotten to lock it up. Like it's all usually one or the other, but not even that often either. It's kind of like, I got in late and was carrying groceries or something. Yeah. But the other thing about the break-in, or the aspect post just break-in, the idea of that, I think it's what puts Zepp in a category all his own, because he isn't just a henchman and he isn't just someone who is motivated to do something to save his own life. There is another edge to that man when he pulls out the stethoscope and puts it to little Diana's heart, then pulls out the gun, aims it at her mother, and then puts the stethoscope back to hear her heart beating faster, and then hands her like a bear. At one point when she's on the phone, he kisses her on the top of the head after she's done. That is sick. Those little things make him more than just a henchman to me and make him, like, again, terrifying. Yeah. Like, that's the worst kind of person you could have in your home with your child, is someone who's gonna get off on this cat and mouse game.
Zepp is the mini boss battle of Saw.
Yes.
For I guess for Leigh Whannell. Is it Adam? It's just like you got the mini boss, but you didn't get the big bad. You didn't get the bad man.
Yeah, and you didn't even know it.
Yeah.
I also just like aesthetically, I really appreciated the, and I think I noticed this every time I watch the movie. I just kind of, it's something I forget about and then get reminded. There's this really distinct, unforgiving, dried blood red hue to the walls in Gordon's house. And then when we follow Adam home in a flashback, I noticed that the hallway is a similar dead red, and then you go inside and you see the paint is chipped, and the paint, but the paint, the layer of paint that is being chipped away is also this kind of like dead brick blood red thing. And then we continue the red motif with him turning on his his dark room light. It's just the red light like flooding that room. And
well,
so
that's that makes sense for James Wan, because he obsessed with the red light, obsessed with like Dario Argento, having to incorporate like the red light everywhere. I wanted to ask you though, because I looked this up and I didn't see a clear answer, but do you know, is it established what city this is taking place in?
I think eventually it's released. Isn't it released that it's Los Angeles? But maybe I'm wrong. I don't have a distinct memory of.
Yeah. Well, because there was things saying that like there was like New Jersey license plates.
Were there?
That's
New Jersey?
Yeah, but there's never anything from what I could tell, or just for anyone on the internet said, that of like what city it takes place in. It's just like a generic city. Kind of like Seven, how I don't think that they ever say what city Seven takes place in. It just, they just wanted to have like kind of like an any city kind of vibe to it.
Well, there's probably a distinct reason I thought it was Los Angeles. I mean, whether I'm right or wrong, I'm probably wrong. But the reason I thought is I'm looking at all locations. Lacey Street Production Center on Lacey Street in Los Angeles, and exteriors and interiors in and around Los Angeles, California. So I'm just recognizing my own stomping ground, which is, so there's the Anytown USA for me. Like I look at it and I'm like, oh, yeah, I've seen that street. Based on literally that street. Yeah. But also, I mean, the other thing that I completely forgot about was just the botched raid of Jigsaw's lair. Because I always, number one, forget that Danny Glover's in this movie, but then I forget, like, well, what happens to him? Like, does he survive? And even when I was watching him, because he plays Detective Tap, and I was watching him with Detective Singh, who had such a distinctive look, I was like, oh, Detective Singh, I don't remember you. Why don't we use you in the other movies? Because you're a good actor, and you've got, like, this kind of like, look that seems very of the essence. And then I saw him die, and I'm like, oh, that's why he doesn't come back in the sequels. I knew there have to be a good reason.
Yeah, the cops are not long for these movies. I did appreciate the introduction of what's the actress's name? The
Detective
female.
Carey.
Yeah, the female cop. Oh, no, just like the actress who plays her, because she was. We've talked about her before.
I'm
sure
she's in a lot. Probably the most notable, if it's
Dina Meyer. Dina Meyer,
yeah, or Dinah, I don't know, Diana,
from Starship Troopers,
and Friends.
Yeah. Who is she?
She's the actress that Joey does the play with, and then he has the affair with her. And then she's having, but that's like the last thing that's revealed. It's that the fact that they've been doing an alien play. It seemed like this domestic drama about a marriage. She was in
Piranha 3D.
Okay. Yeah. I always forget about that movie too, but she's good. I like her.
Yeah, I feel like she definitely had a bigger career before this. Like I distinctly remember her being in a lot of like 90s fare.
Sure.
But yeah, I wish she was in this a little bit more. Yeah.
Incentive to watch the other movies now.
Because I don't think we never see Allie or Diana again after this. Like that story's over.
I even forget if we find out what happens to them. Like I can't remember.
Well, the end of the movie,
don't tell me.
No, but I mean at the end of this.
No, I know, but I mean in terms of like, the Gordon family.
I would
what
just
happened?
assume that she was just like moved on with her life, and took the. I
After
mean,
that.
even when things were not dire, like those two hated each other. So.
Well, okay, that's another thing. Like, I love that Carrie always, and I do believe him, like, after shrieking at the top of his lungs, I didn't have sex with her! Or whatever.
Yeah.
But the fact that when he finally does get to see that Polaroid of the two of them tied up and gagged and everything like that, and just, again, with the melodrama, and then being on the phone, just like, Diana, baby, like, I mean, it's... It's just, I can't help but be moved, but it's also just so theatrical. It's so like, what you would expect to see in a soap opera of a man who, is like having his conscience kind of catch up with him. It's playing to the cheap seats, and but I mean, there's also. Another thing that I appreciated that I forgot about cinematically, I mean, it's a trope, but it's a trope that works for this movie, is when Adam is in his apartment and he suspects that, somebody's there and the power is out. So he takes his camera and just starts flashing. I started to feel myself like cringe and like pull my collar up, just like in a kind of like, oh my God, I'm watching a horror movie. And again, I've seen it before. It's happened before in multiple horror movies, and still it's done in a way that I feel is effective.
Yeah, we saw that most recently in You Were Next.
Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't because we talked about that particular scene in that movie, and it felt like almost like by that point we were kind of just going through the motions of just like getting to the climax. So that's always been like one of the least memorable parts of the movie, and probably wasn't necessary. But I think it's more effective here for sure.
It's a great device for tension, I find.
Yeah.
For me, it's effective. All you have to do is have me care enough about the well-being of the person. And that is the kind of thing that tips me over, like, is the fact that, like, now they're in peril and they don't know what's coming, and they are only getting momentary clues that are kind of like breadcrumbing them to their fate, and that's terrifying.
The thing is, like, with the characters in this movie, I don't necessarily give a shit. Like, I'm not I'm not attached to them in that way of just like, I don't like anyone, I should say. Not that I'm not attached to them. I just don't like anyone in this movie. But they still do a really good job of like connecting us with their story, that by the end I fully do feel for, like, after he shot Adam and then realizes he made a mistake, and he's has that moment where he's just like, I'm gonna, like doing his thing, like he's gonna get help.
I'm gonna get help, but if I don't, I'm gonna bleed to death. So I promise. Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, and it's great by that, because that's what I liked. I liked the movie started off, and I'm just like, oh, I hate these people. They're awful people. But you get, but the more and more you go through this experience with them, it's just like it makes it better. That's why I feel like it's you have to commit to watching. At least from like start to finish to really appreciate the movie, because like otherwise you're just like, I don't care, it's just like strangers in a room.
Oh, maybe I'm just a pushover. I mean, because I heard what you said about like where it lands. Like, it still lands in a way that like actually matters to you in terms of like the turn of the movie and everything like that. But for me, there was something about like the intimacy of them kind of like moan crying like over each other. I mean, Gordon and Adam. Just at the end, like after everybody else is taken out, and Tobin Bell hasn't gotten up yet, but they're just sitting there, and he's begging him not to go, and he's like, I promise I'll send help, and all that stuff. There's a moment where they're kind of like they're both laying down, and their heads are very near each other, and there's an intimacy to it that made me feel a strange bonding transpiring between the two of them. Like there's like you can't get that close to someone you hate. So the fact that it's not like, and now they're going to be friends forever or anything like that. They're just two people who have been through trauma bonding, but they've been through something. And I feel like the two of them, for anybody who's going to criticize either performance, one thing that I definitely got from them was an odd subliminal camaraderie that also, maybe it was just James Wan's shooting, of it, like the execution of the camera work, the fact that I'm seeing these two men leveled off, like they're now on completely even ground. The only difference is one has now kind of like, kind of chewed through his foot to be free, and the other one is still chained to the wall. Now that I think about it, you know what kind of would have been, it would have completely been the antithesis to what I'm describing in terms of like intimacy and even a level of compassion and recognizing each other's humanity. Like, I see you as a person now, undeniably. You were something else to me before. I didn't know I could trust you, or I thought I could judge you because of the choices you made or something like that. Now we're just two people who want to get through this. But that said, it would have been funny if Cary Elwes had been anywhere near the saw that was still intact while he was crawling out, and just kind of tossed it over to Adam. Like, if you get, like if I'm taking too long, here's another way out if you want it. I mean that might have been pretty badass, actually.
I even feel like at that moment, like, he just like was not like thinking clearly. To get to that point, that manic, like, I'm just gonna saw through my flesh and bone. Because I was even thinking, like, because first he was trying to reach the phone, and then he was using the box to try to reach it, and it was just coming up short. And all I could think is, like, that saw is probably quite a bit longer than the box, that you could have just used the saw. And even just the way that the saw is designed, it could have, like, been used as, like, a hook to just kind of, like, grab the phone and, like, pull it in. So it was kind of like,
right.
Come on, do better. But I think that the thing
when you're panicking,
I get it. No.
That's going to be rational.
That's true. But I would still, like, before I got to that moment, I would like, what do I do? But I guess he really just cared about his family. But the thing that, like, actually, the thing that grossed me out the most about this movie is when Adam sticks his hand in the poopy water.
Yes! I was just going to say,
And the thing that pisses me off is just the fact that he doesn't try to clean it after. Like, there's a tank of fresh water. There's the bathtub that clearly is working. He doesn't do anything. He's just, like, fine, like, touching everything with, like, his hand covered in shit. And all I could think is, like, did Jigsaw, Johnny Jigsaw, did he, like, as he was setting this all up, did he just go take a deuce in the toilet beforehand as part of, like,
I wondered about that too.
I'm gonna leave it, and then took, like, drew the little heart as well. Was the heart in blood, or was it in feces? I couldn't tell.
It looked like feces to me, but who knows?
He's so twisted. That's so. I'm getting like Brenda now. Just like Jigsaw, like setting up that he's just like craps in the toilet and just like, I'm gonna draw a heart. And
right. I also wonder, like, if maybe like the last occupants of that room, like, one of the things was like, you must imbibe all of this ipecac, or not ipecac, but something, like a Malox or something, some kind of stool releaser, and you must, crap everything into this toilet, and then you must reach and retrieve the key from out of your intestines.
They need to do
in the toilet, and then he just thought, oh, you know what? I've already got fresh feces in the toilet. Let me just leave it that way. Great. And let me get a paintbrush and just.
Oh god. Yeah. If they ever do like a flashback, like maybe there is a flashback to Saw 1 in this new movie, and I just want to see like John Kramer like laying on the floor playing dead there when Adam sticks his hand in the toilet, and for him to just be like then no one can hear him just like tittering at that.
That'd be fun, but
I mean, it would be so unnecessary. But I mean, it could have been an outtake. It could have been an outtake.
It could have been.
Yeah.
But I was grateful for, even though, because I think the first time I saw it, I thought, what an idiot. When the moment you mentioned with Adam with the toilet and everything, the first thing I would go for would be the tank, because that's the thing that has the heart on it. If the heart had been on the bowl, interestingly enough, that would have told me, oh, it's in the bowl.
Yeah. What does he even say? He's just like, he reaches and he's like, no solids.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Like, and then he just tries the tank behind it. And and you're right. I just think, like, there's water right there. Just rinse your hand.
Yeah. And it was all like green. Like, there's just something icky about
all right,
it.
I'm done. But
me too, actually.
But in terms of like, in terms of like the gross out factor, or let's say not gross out, but the violence and kind of like, I guess, akin to gore. Like, I think probably the thing that gets repeated or revisited in terms of tone and I don't know, dare I say theme? I guess theme, is when Gordon takes the saw to his own ankle and just saws off his foot and everything like that. The thing is, and I probably said this to you in like off pod, like just in conversation before, but because by and large, like the franchise does kind of like go to the nth degree after this, and I feel like even though there are some more graphic and even more extreme acts that we witness in the body of this franchise, few of them, not none of them, but few of them for me are as on par with regard to, like I said before, effective setup, execution, and payoff. I just kind of feel like the fact that we're straddling multiple storylines at that particular point, and each one is kind of like raising the bar of intensity, that's effective. And then the fact that like not only is Cary Elwes portraying a man who is driven to something where it is unmistakable. The choice has been made. It's not even like he's conscious of it. He is a desperate man who is willing to go to whatever lengths he has to because his family fucking needs him, and that he is realizing at that moment that's what's important to him. That's what the traps are about. That's what's the scary thing. Like the kind of like the fairy tale aspect of it is the morality tale also. The fact that like if you believe that you kind of deserve to be in here, but you also deserve to get out, there's something that you can learn about yourself. I think that's why, Amanda drinks the Kool-Aid, as it were, the Flavor-Aid, sorry. But, because it wasn't brand Kool-Aid that those people drank. But anyway, but the fact that everything is so amplified that it feels, and we all even see Adam like kind of reeling, just going, oh my god, and he's like our audience stand-in at that point. It's so incredibly hard to watch that and not get caught up, whereas not only with this franchise but other like torture porn type of movies that followed suit for the next 10 years after this, I feel did it to the point where I kind of wasn't involved, or I was in fact deadened by the amount of violence, the sheer just onslaught of never-ending violence that was going on relentlessly. I've said this before, I think it starts to feel like you're being pummeled to the point where your nerves just die. You just go into shock and you just kind of lay there and just say, fine, movie, just finish me off, just do whatever it is you need to do, because I can't feel anything anymore. Nothing is reaching me, and this movie never reaches that point for me. I feel affected by kind of everything that happens in it.
I mean, I think that it's sort of a combination of the gore of just like that, the torture porn era, but also the fact that horror at that time was just incredibly cynical, and I don't know if this was like the first. It very well might have been like the first one to kind of introduce that, because that just became the staple moving forward, where everything was
Depends on when was Hostel released, because Hostel was another one too.
Hostel was a year after. That was 2005.
Okay.
And also very cynical. I'd say maybe a little bit
the
more
Texas
of a
Chainsaw,
yeah,
Texas Chainsaw remake.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like from what I remember, the ending is a little bit more happier, but the prequel
That's
for
true.
sure is that's just like bleak and depressing.
Yes.
But definitely like something that was definitely adopted by the remake era, because a lot of those movies were just, it was like, we're doing these movies over again, but everything is gritty and ugly and depressing. Because for some reason that's what people wanted. I don't know what, maybe it was just like a result of like post 9/11 culture where everyone was just like terrified and in a bad mood, so like everything in the media and pop culture had to reflect that. That it was sort of like, it just came about because, I mean, if we look at like movies like Scream before that, where everything was like fun and flashy and popped out and like very much like what we did last week with Urban Legend, like they couldn't keep doing movies like that because it was just, they were on their way out. Nobody wanted to feel good about themselves, or people did.
It was going to take a lot to shock people. That's another thing. I think the shock of, I mean, because 9/11 oftentimes gets brought up in the conversation. The same way when you're discussing the history of horror in the 20th century, the JFK assassination is always a point where it's just kind of like the movies that came before and the movies that followed and what they're emblematic of. And I feel like 9/11 definitely had that impact on horror. Yeah, I
think that's such a interesting element of the horror genre because for how kind of pushed to the wayside it is by critics and a lot of audiences, horror is probably more reflective or emblematic, as you say, of like present day culture and society, because it really does reflect people. It's supposed to encapsulate what our fears are, and not just like based on a specific date and time, but also from like region to region, like different countries. Like you look at like Korean horror, there's something that it's more so based in like spirits and things like that, because that is what like Korean culture is more fearful of than something like that. Like you and I just spent all this time talking about home invasions and people like in our house, so obviously for like North American horror movies, like that's going to be a huge thing that we're going to see a lot of. So it's interesting, like whatever the current climate is of the world, like that's always going to be reflected in horror, and I think that the genre deserves more credit for that, of just like how it really does just kind of like bring that to life in a way, because you don't see that in comedy or drama. Like comedy is like the response to it. Like how do you deal with those fears rather than face them?
Right. Amen. Like, I mean, I mean, I think what horror does also, I mean, right, just to piggyback off of what you're saying, because I agree with you, I'd say it's allowed to manifest the evil, the evils of this world, or the things that scare us, or the things that we need to push back against, or some kind of conglomerate of all of that and more. But it allows them to manifest in different ways and give us insight to what, even representations of, like, from director to director, like what does evil look like to you? And that's when you have a director that is lucky enough to have a long career, and you can see the different manifestations of evil and the different ways that they want to comment on society and the direction we've gone, the mistakes that we're doomed to repeat if we don't remember this. I think of filmmakers like John Carpenter and Wes Craven, of course, in particular, just kind of like always mindfully kind of like investing themselves and the things that they see destroying us into their films. And that can be obliquely, but it can also be very, very blunt and very, plain to see. Like I think of like something like They Live, where it's just kind of like, oh, all right, I'm very, very clear on the message that you're serving up to me, John Carpenter. Thank you very much, because something about that level of bluntness I actually find incredibly refreshing and even courageous, because I think a lot of other directors might have been scared of being that blunt. Like, am I being too ham-fisted? Is it too heavy-handed? Am I hitting people over the head? If you're just not scared of it and you're just like, no, this is the story I'm telling, then I think, and you do it well, you do the rest of it, the filmmaking of it and the crafting of it and the acting of it in a way that is a credit to all the artists who are collaborating, an audience is going to respond, whether it's at the box office and initially or in time. I think most filmmakers would probably love the box office return, but ultimately you want your film remembered, years later, and to still be resonating with audiences and to find new audiences as the generations continue to progress. That's true. That's the test. That's the test of. And I don't. And again, like coming back to Saw with that, I don't know if like because it's become so saturated as a franchise. I don't know if like this movie in particular is going to be remembered, because it's probably mostly going to be remembered as just this big, messy soap opera. Right. CSI, God knows where, but but with an R rating.
Yeah.
But I mean, as long as people continue the conversation, like, I mean, it's kind of got me grateful. I'm getting offered a lot of podcast recommendations these days from Apple Podcasts, what I listen to. I don't take them all, but it's kind of, you'd think it might be a little threatening or a little undercutting, just kind of like, oh my gosh, even more? Like, come on, I'm a podcaster. But the thing is, as long as people are keeping the conversation going, somebody who may not catch this conversation has caught a conversation elsewhere or will catch it. And that's another thing that I love about this. It lends itself to that storytelling aspect, the campfire stories, you know, that are passed down from generation to another. As long as you get the news of this thing, this movie, and enough so that you're motivated to see it for yourself and see what you think, and you know, agree with us, disagree with us. That's the whole thing. That's why we do this, is just to kind of like put our fandom out on the table and say, I'll show you mine if you show me yours, you know. It's one of the most glorious games of Doctor that I've ever played in my life.
I don't know if I have very much else to say about Saw. We didn't really talk a whole lot about Amanda, but I feel like there's not a whole lot to say about her here.
Not at this juncture,
unless
no.
you had something,
All I'll say at this juncture, I agree with what you laid out as far as like her. I guess what you were alluding to, like what she represents in terms of like actually believing that this was something that saved her. I mean, she says as much. But another thing that strikes me is just in Shawnee Smith's performance, the humility and she manages to straddle her trauma with also this weird serendipitous gratitude. Like if she never had the line, "He saved me," and just had to sit there and just kind of like recount it, I feel like I'd be wondering like, okay, you were obviously really affected by what happened, but not like the way everyone around you thinks you were. Like it turned your life around. It worked for you. Yeah. And that's scarier than anything else, because that will embolden, you know, that Johnny Jigsaw's going to get wind of that, and he's going to be, you know, it's only going to confirm that he should keep going. Ugh.
The interesting thing with her is that he blatantly lies. He blatantly lies to her. He says that this is a dead man in the room with you, when clearly he's not. So he forces her. So this is part of the hypocrisy of Jigsaw, which just annoys me. But clearly that did it for her. That helped her, and it's just like, I would like legally, I would wonder like what would happen to her. Would she be convicted of murder in that situation? Because you know that's where I could see the thing coming in of just like, Jigsaw hasn't killed anyone, but essentially in facilitating one of his victims' survival, they had to kill someone. Even though I think an argument could be made that like just because on the tape he says that he's dead, that it's almost like she didn't know. Because I don't remember, did she actually tell the police that he was still alive?
Because they told Gordon. And he was like, "You mean he was still alive?" And they're like,
right.
Yep. But I mean, I'm not going to pretend I understand the inner workings of the bureaucracy and everything, but the words that come to mind immediately that I think would come to a lawyer's mind, and of course she's going to be, you know, assigned an attorney if she doesn't already have one for hire, and I get the feeling that she doesn't. But and also, I mean, I think a lot of people would see her as kind of like a victim, you know. So there's words like self-defense, because, you know, she didn't ask to be put in that trap, and also just you could even plead, I think,
well, I don't think
temporary
that's
insanity.
Yeah.
Like when you're driven to do something, like it was not of her own free will. She didn't wake up that morning and think, you know,
it wouldn't be like first degree. There's nothing premeditated about it, but it wouldn't be self-defense either, because self-defense is self-defense against someone harming you. But
well, indirect self-defense then.
I don't know if that's a thing, but
like if she honestly believed that it was going to save her life to kill this other person to unlock this bear trap on her head, then I'm not gonna basically defending herself. I'm the lawyer, damn it! I'm the therapist and the lawyer this episode.
Okay. All I'll say about Shawnee Smith, in addition to that, is that my memory of her before this, because I always used to catch reruns of PICKER. Do you remember that show with Ted Danson?
Yeah, my dad loved that show.
The grumpy doctor, and Shawnee Smith played his secretary, or just the office assistant, and she was really ditzy and airheaded, and it was just she was incompetent at her job, and that was the whole shtick. They were night and day, and it's just I just remember watching that and loving her because she was so funny, and it just his response to everything that she did was so funny. So I mean, if you ever check out, just go on YouTube and just check out Shawnee Smith and in PICKER. Her performances
Ted Danson in anything.
Well, I'm talking about Shawnee here, but her performances
I know
run the gamut. She can do dramatic, she can do scary, she can do funny. She's extremely talented.
I think my first exposure was the Blob remake in 1988. That was my first exposure to her. Not knowing that this is Shawnee Smith, but that was the first thing I ever saw her in.
Well, if
I was obsessed with that movie.
We did cover the Blob remake on the old podcast for anyone on Patreon. That's another benefit of Patreon. You can go listen to all of the pre-Cherry Picker episodes, because we talked about Shawnee Smith in that role, and I don't think everything was glowing on her behalf, but with that said, let's mosey on over to the Cherry Picker now.
It's not like we killed people on purpose.
So, what are you thinking? I mean, we kind of
on top.
Yeah.
We kind of what?
Well, we kind of the only. I mean, for me, what it seemed like you were getting at, and what I would agree with, would be Carrie Elways as Larry, Dr. Larry Gordon.
He. I feel like I would never say he carries the movie, but he but he doesn't carry Elways the movie per se, but he does have to carry us through the multiple storylines. His is the one we have to keep coming back to, and the one we have to be the most immediate with, because I think we spend the most time with him.
I think he's the main character here.
Yeah, that's a question for Ryan C. Showers, though. I wonder how the time is distributed.
Get those screen times. I think we definitely
get those screen times.
We spend more, because I'd say their screen time is equal ish, just being in the same room there.
Yes.
But I think that we do spend more time with him in flashbacks and side stories than we do with Adam. So I would always say that Carrie Elways is the main character. That doesn't necessarily mean that the main character is the best, but watching it this time, he was the one that I got the most out of his performance, and just and glommed to him more than anyone else. So, and I appreciated the theatrics. I loved the again, just the range that he had with that character. So that's what I would say. I don't even know who else
quite a bit.
Yeah, and also I couldn't imagine who else I would pick.
It's early to start picking the legacy characters. It's still it's largely his film. I mean, like I said, he doesn't carry it, but he's the one we have to keep returning to, and he maintains my focus, maintains my interest when he doesn't maintain my sympathy. And that's also a feat in and of itself. So, yeah, I agree. Carrie Elways is Dr. Larry Gordon. Let's go for it.
Awesome. Okay.
Cherry on top.
Cherry on top. Now for the Cherry Picker. Last week we asked you who deserves to die the most in urban legend.
Uh-huh.
I nominated Paul Gardner. You nominated Michelle Mancini. Based off of votes on Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, the total came to 637 for Paul versus 411 for Michelle.
Oh, that's close. Thanks, guys.
Close, yeah. Amethyst.
It's close when you've lost.
Amethyst Frost. Michelle sucks, and Brenda was justified in killing her, especially for singing Total Eclipse of the Heart that poorly. But she has such little screen time that I have to axe the movie's 1 weak spot. Paul, to quote Queen Brenda, you and I would have been so fucking hot together, Paul, but you're not that fucking hot. You're not that fucking cute. Other than Paul being a charisma vacuum, I love this movie and Eddie's Alicia Witt impression and Brenda's PowerPoint presentation killer reveal and the cameos from Robert Englund, Brad Dourif, and Danielle Harris. Glad Urban Legends reception has improved over the years.
Oh, I'm in good company. Thanks.
Sean Prinsick. In a bizarre coincidence, I saw this for the second time a few days ago to remind myself if I actually liked it. Spoiler alert, it's not for me. Although I will say Rebecca Gayheart is my favorite character in the movie, and her manic performance in the climax is absolute perfection. It's always great to see Michael Rosenbaum as well. Personally, I would have preferred Tara Reid survived instead of Jared Leto and Alicia Witt. Sorry, not sorry. She had more personality than Alicia. Now, full disclosure, I don't hate Jared Leto. However, Paul is easily the most punchable asshat in the movie. This is why I vote for Paul. The revelation about Michelle Mancini does make a good case for her, as that was an awful prank that makes her hard to empathize with. But she did receive her punishment from the law. If anything, the killer should have gone after the idiot that just gave the two girls probation. What kind of a verdict was that? Maybe that's what Brenda did, like before and after the killing of everyone at Pendleton. Now I'm gonna go after the legal system. Yeah.
Where's that movie?
Yeah. Grant Dempsey. You know what? I was just about to vote for Michelle because I like Paul more or less, but then I remembered his line in the climax. So if this is an urban legend, at what point do we get to the twist? And the punchline is just, ooh, Brenda's still alive and in the back seat again. But never mind, we've still got her handled. That moment needs a better payoff, so let that payoff be death to Paul. P.S. Ever notice the similarity between this climax and the climax of What Lies Beneath? Killer reappears in the back of a vehicle, attacks driver from behind. Wild swerving on a bridge at night, killer goes into the water.
Did we touch on that? I can't remember.
No, I don't think we did. Maybe.
I made other
yeah.
connections, but maybe not in the climax. Good observation. Good eye.
I can't remember, but yeah, that is a good good connection there, Grant. Peculiar Chap was waiting for you guys to pick up on the complete Child's Play reference in the opening, Mancini and Brad Dourif, but you're both preoccupied with Melrose Place.
Oh, Mancini.
Anyway, well, because look, if Michael Mancini is a legend in his own right, but so is Dawn. So it's hard to say, but I don't know if that was. I'm a man
of a certain age.
Yeah,
I just it's more fun to imagine she's related to Thomas Calabro's character in Melrose Place than to think like, oh, an allusion made to horror god Don Mancini. Like love the man, but he's not fictitious. So
and Melrose Place was still going on in 1998.
Yeah, so, I stand by it.
Yeah, people would have gone to see that and like, oh, Mancini, like that doctor. Anyway, I wanted to vote for Michelle because of her bad singing, and I find her saying freak show as an indicator that she hadn't learned from her past mistakes. Also, didn't she almost hit a car because she was looking for a tape in the back seat? Definitely didn't learn her lesson. Yeah. She really does suck. But I voted for Paul instead. Because even though he is a forgivable second-rate version of Gale Weathers, he's being portrayed by an actor so full of himself and could have possibly harassed a lot of his coworkers with his method acting approach. Not only is he full of himself, but is one of those actors who gave method acting a bad reputation. Paul is not even that handsome. Joshua Jackson and Michael Rosenbaum are more handsome. Brenda is so wrong for having the hots for him, but then again, she crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
With that last point you made.
Yeah. I actually agree. I think that Joshua Jackson and Michael Rosenbaum are, I'd say more handsome, but I would be more inclined.
Yeah. If they were to ask me out and Jared Leto was to ask me out, I'd go with either one of them. Whoever asked me first instead of Jared Leto. But if Jared Leto asked me first, I'd still say no. There might be Joshua Jackson or Michael Rosenbaum around the corner.
Yeah, yeah. So, like if Jared Leto was to ask you to the prom, be like, maybe if one of those two don't ask me.
If nothing better comes along. And then if Danielle Harris asked me, I'd go with her, or Alicia Witt, any of the women too. Like I would.
Yeah, Paul, like Jared Leto is kind of like he's behind in the lineup. Like he's like the eighth pick.
Even the adults like Loretta Devine, Robert Englund, Brad Dourif. I'd go out with any
creepy
of them
janitor.
Yes, whoever the stuffy dean. I'd probably.
I love him. Too. I feel like that would be a fun date. Like he just trash. Like he'd be like the Waldorf Statler of the urban legend. just sitting there criticizing youth,
right?
You know,
in his box seat. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Silent Saturn. Voting for Paul. I don't have anything against the character or Jared Leto for that matter, who's actually really cute here, if not that cute. Ugh. But Zack appreciates the film as it ought to be, so I want him to win. Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sucked.
Sorry.
As much as I can't stand Jared Leto, it has always bothered me since seeing Urban Legend when it came out that Michelle prejudged Chucky himself when he was trying to help her, let alone her ear-scrapping rendition of Total Eclipse of the Heart. So Michelle, faux show. Jacqueline Marta, listen, Jared Leto is Jared Leto, but he didn't kill someone and get away with it. Hashtag justice for Brenda. Mm-hmm. Danielle D, love the pod and Urban Legend. I watched this movie many times as a kid, so I was excited to revisit before listening to the episode. Rebecca Gayheart as Brenda is iconic. I have to say, I would have nominated Natalie for the Cherry Picker. I don't think I ever connected with her character, but this latest rewatch, I found her to be dull, whiny, and frankly, insufferable. Though Paul is pretty useless, I chose Michelle, because she's also terrible, and the most Natalie-adjacent character for obvious reasons. Well, thank you for the compliment on the podcast and Urban Legend.
Yeah, awesome.
Freaky Taxi. I was gonna say Paul, but that was my Jared Leto bias getting in the way. Michelle was pretty judgmental towards Brad Dourif as soon as she saw him. The singing may not be good, but I also love a good car jam session. Maybe not on a dark, rainy night, but still. I feel like a lot of people will vote Paul because it's Jared Leto, and Michelle was only on screen for a short time. Vicky screams. This one is tricky. On one hand, Michelle is clearly a garbage human, considering she killed someone with a reckless prank and then was a grade A douche canoe to Brad Dourif for having a stutter.
Douche canoe.
On the other hand, Paul is Jared Leto, which is probably the worst crime. Matthias Egeman. Michelle wasn't a nice girl. Brenda's boyfriend died, and she was cold-hearted against Michael McDonald, the gas station man. She didn't trust him. Paul is so bland as a hero, and why didn't he ever watch the backseat after everything happening that nearly killed him? I say Michelle. She started everything, and more people died. Sean Chalant. Oh, I like that. Like nonchalant.
Yeah, I like it.
Sean Chalant. Her name is Mancini, and she disrespects Brad Dourif like that. Off with her head. Kenta Voorhees. What? It's not between Parker or Dean Adams? I'll have to go with Michelle Mancini. She's the front leading cause of David's accidental death, and she's probably related to Michael Mancini from Melrose Place, which is never good.
Hey, thank you.
Parker and Dean Adams were too enjoyable.
Yeah.
I like them too much.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do?
I wouldn't even if it was Michael Mancini, I wouldn't get rid of him. He's too valuable.
No.
Yeah.
beloved scoundrel.
Whenever we do the inevitable Melrose Place, we're not going to actually do that. Don't worry.
No. I mean, maybe we could do like one episode for an after dark.
God.
Maybe.
No, that's
find the
too
darkest
niche.
episode.
I'll just tell you that the vote would either come down to like Billy or Allison.
Yeah, that would be fun.
No, because Allison was fun when she had her like crazy days when she flew off the wagon. Billy,
it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
There are times she's insufferable as well, but I think those are the two safest bets.
Well,
depends where we are in the series.
We'll have this conversation away from
sorry
everyone
guys.
Else. Yeah.
Back to business now. To business.
Where were we here? Jayden Pasco. There's a lot of numbers and letters combined together. So I tried my best. I hate Michelle every second she's on screen. Paul could be better handled in the story, but he does not bother me. Also, I haven't heard the pod yet, but I hope... where did it go? Oops, technical difficulties. Also, I haven't heard the pod yet, but I hope Reese gets cherry on top. I recently watched the film, and for some reason have enjoyed her presence like I never did before. I think she would have been second, for me at least, yeah. Blue Box 87. Michelle did cause a death and she really can't sing. She also gets Charles Lee Ray into trouble even though he was trying to help her. But Paul is Jared Leto, so in the words of Parker, bye Paul. Fred.
I love they generally seem to be like, I don't know, column A, column B. Like we made two good decisions, I think, this time. There's a lot of I'm torn, but and then here's my decision. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. But notice how it's not really for Paul, it's for Jared.
Yes, I predicted that.
Fred Hodder. I vote for Michelle because she is the catalyst that started the whole movie thanks to her negligent driving, plus her god-awful rendition of Total Eclipse of the Heart makes my ears bleed, and she was a dick to Brad Dourif. On a side note, I would have loved it if, when she drove away, instead of yelling, "There's someone in your back seat," if he went full Chucky and said, "You ungrateful little bitch." I love that he's... both. Yeah, I love that there's like the behind the scenes footage where he's doing the chant, the Dambala.
Ade Tuwe Dambala. Oh my God.
Give me the power, I beg of you.
But yeah, just to watch him go like, there's someone in your back seat, you ungrateful bitch. That would have been funny.
You filthy whore.
You stupid bitch, you think you can fuck with me? And she's still going while she drives away.
Give me the boy and I'll let you live.
Yeah, fun.
Right. Shiglet. I can't get over this Jared Leto of it all, so yeah, get rid of him. Autumn Joe Staggs. It's funny Jared Leto has stated he wasn't in this movie because I agree. I don't even remember him. So let's kill Paul and keep it that way.
Oh, I wish I didn't remember him.
Kira Wood. Michelle for being judgmental of Chucky and for the terrible singing. Blueberry Saturn. Frankly, I just don't care for Jared Leto. Movie Maniac. I voted Jared Leto. I see this movie. See, no one's voting for Paul. It's Jared Leto. I did see this movie, but it's been a few years, so I don't remember the characters that much. But if you had seen Suicide Squad with him as the Joker, you would want to strap Jared Leto to a stake and watch him while it's burning. now we're just picking cherry pickers for movies that we're not even covering here.
Yeah, right. And Jared Leto cried all the way to the bank.
Jagger, death to the Morbius.
Okay.
The YouTube is like purposely pushing these comments to the bottom because it's just like these don't have anything to do with urban legend. Crypt just says Paul. And Stephanie Ellen T. My apologies. That guy is such a weirdo. The entire movie, he makes me aggravated. And then at the end, when he slips and clapping, get out of here. I think when he slips in, when he's just like very nice. You know, remember that part?
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Nah, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? So, for Saw, I mean, story to be basic here, but the whole time I was thinking, I was just like, it's got to be, wait, I just want to make sure I get the full name. I'm nominating Zepp Hindle. Because he's a creep, and he's a mini boss, in the grand scheme of things, and that I mean, kudos to the actor, Michael Emerson, because he plays that type of character really well. I remember he was on Lost, also played a dirtbag, so I get this is a case of me voting for a character. Like, I don't enjoy him, but he does play the part well. But yeah, he can go.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Detective David Tapp. And the reason why is I feel like Detective Tapp is the one who plants the seed for the kind of like corrupt police officer or former police officer. Like, what happens when access is granted to dangerous people who feel emboldened in a very Jigsaw way to kind of like determine what the path forward should be, regardless of what the laws are. And there's like just the fact that like when he's having his exchange with Singh before they do the raid of the lair, and he's just kind of like, do you think we have enough to get a warrant, though? And it's just like, who said anything about a warrant? And I'm just like, that's your mistake. And I was right. I forgot all about that scene I said before, because it just works against him. Here he thinks he's like going outside the law. And this is the kind of character that I think was kind of like uplifted in a lot of action movies in the era prior to this, in the 80s and 90s, where if there is like a cop who's, gone wrong or gone rogue, and
we're just waiting for him to have his line of like, I'm not too old for this shit.
Yeah, right.
Classic lethal weapon. Yeah.
Or I am the law, like whatever. But I mean, just like to the point where you are willing to overstep your bounds that have been put in place for your safety, to the point where it puts you in peril and your partner who blindly follows you there, who should have known better also. But because they can't even call for backup at that point. So everything. Also, he's the one who's paying off Adam. So, and he's the one who puts everybody in peril. Like the only reason that family is like in peril is because like he's sitting there like a crazy person, just like spying on it through his little window, and just kind of and he doesn't do anything. He achieves absolutely nothing. All of the boundaries that he crosses are for naught, and in fact, he ends up hurting the people who he should have been protecting the entire time. So I kill him. I'm probably gonna lose, but I don't care.
No, you have a solid case. I just hope that people realize that.
I doubt it.
You, but,
I doubt it.
Anyway, you can vote on Instagram. We're at the Cherry Picker Pod. You can vote on YouTube. If you are new to the Cherry Picker and are listening, go over to our YouTube channel, the Cherry Picker, subscribe. Polls are in the community section. If you are watching on YouTube, you can also listen to the podcast. The RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. You can also vote. You get extra votes if you're on Patreon as well. Like we said before, subscribe there to support the podcast and you'll get early access. Where can they find you on social media, Eduardo?
You can't. What about you, Zack? No, I'm just kidding. Letterboxd, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, which I'm still not on. I have not revisited it since our last pod, where I hadn't revisited it in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't know. I need to get better about being on that. But you can follow me there.
Yeah,
Edward is truth, one word on.
This is what happens when like old people like us try to go on TikTok. Like we don't know what the fuck.
Yeah. I'll figure it out. Maybe I don't know.
Are you gonna
What
do
about
like
you,
the fun videos where you're just smiling and dancing?
I'm gonna do like a half-assed Macarena.
The Macarena, yeah.
Wearing only my boxer shorts, just like everyone else on TikTok. That's what I'm gonna do.
Do it.
And smirking. I'm just gonna smirk into the camera, like look how
what
cute
am I so
am.
happy
God,
about?
I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't fucking stand that. Anyway, what about you, Zack Cherry? Where can they find you?
You can find me on my Instagram at retrobitchface, all one word. My main YouTube channel, Zack Cherry, ZackCherry. The links are also all over the place anyway. Twitter, ZackCherry8. Letterboxd, Zack Cherry. What do we got going on next week?
Okay. Is it the one where the girl and her friends and they go back, or she goes back and plays the thing in her trauma, and then it happens, and then they're dead, and she has to. You can't be alive. Is that the one?
That's the one.
Friday the 13th, Part 3, D. The D's
Whoa.
I don't know.
I love how the D just kind of like swept in there.
Well, I'm trying to like the 3D titles. Yeah. Oh, so much fun.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one. So, and we've got a Friday the 13th coming up. So, just in the tradition of covering Friday the 13th. I mean, sans Freddy versus Jason, because that's not really a Friday the 13th movie. But all the Friday the 13th we do on, I guess not. Well, we come out on Tuesday, but the week of. So that's what's happening next. And of course, there's going to be lots of fun this October. It's spooky season. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will be